Thank you so much, and hello, everybody. Alyssa, just to say one quick thing, thank you to you and your team at Crypto Compare, to Hen Arad at Solidus Labs, and to David Carmen from Global DCA. It has been a pleasure to work with you guys over the last several months in putting this 4-day event together, and we're in the home stretch. So I am hopeful that my Wi-Fi doesn't go off, but we'll leave it at that. Knock on wood. With that said, Michele, let me turn to you. First, let me say just congrats again on your recent move to FinCEN, and thank you for agreeing to be a participant in this event.
Thank you, Jackson, and thank you to all of the companies hosting and organizations hosting this event. I'm happy to be here.
So we've only got about 30 minutes. I've got multiple questions with multiple questions within those questions. So let me get right to the point here. I think what I wanted to do first and foremost is really focus on background, a little bit of background, and some overview on the position itself. And for those listening in who may not read FinCEN press releases, back and forth on an everyday basis, tell us a little bit about your background and really how you came to join FinCEN and what I believe is really a pivotal time as the agency contemplates enhanced regulatory reporting requirements for the crypto asset space.
Right. So my background for most of my professional career has been as an attorney at DOJ. I actually started as a trial attorney kind of in the trenches down in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Miami in 2003, working on pretty much everything that came in the door, and got my first taste of working on some money laundering and financial crimes down there before moving out to Colorado to the U.S. Attorney's Office there, where I was an organized crime drug enforcement task force prosecutor. And as I was working on these kind of large scale drug trafficking, money laundering cases, I stumbled into cryptocurrency really the way I think a lot of people do with some of the new criminal activity if you're working in the investigative or prosecutorial space. An agent walked in my office one day and said, "Hey, there's this thing called Bitcoin, this place called the Silk Road where you can buy drugs and pay for cryptocurrency with it. Does that sound like something you would work on?" And of course, my answer was, bring it on. That sounds fascinating. And that was back in late 2012, early 2013, prior to the Silk Road marketplace that a lot of people are familiar with being taken down in the fall of 2013. And from there, I prosecuted a number of darknet market cases, and also some of the money laundering and BSA violators that were operating both in the District of Colorado and elsewhere from that position, until I moved over to Main Justice at the Money Laundering and Asset Recovery section in the criminal division. There was a need for some subject matter expertise, which I had developed kind of just by doing out in the field. There hadn't been any policy really developed on best practices for charging these types of things, as well as seizing assets, best practices, and what the policy should be around forfeiture of cryptocurrency, whether it was traditional forfeiture of, say, traditionally victimless crimes like drug trafficking, or whether we were looking at fraud where we really were needed to recover assets for victims that happened to be in the form of cryptocurrency. And then, as you're aware, there's been a lot of regulatory and legislative activity in this space over the last couple of years. And so my role was to opine on DOJ's interests on those pieces of legislation and rulemakings, et cetera, in the subject matter. So that was kind of my background. And, anytime you're working on money laundering, I think if you're doing your job well, you're going to be very familiar with the Bank Secrecy Act. You're going to be very familiar with all of the data and the services that FinCEN offers to law enforcement. And so I became very familiar with FinCEN, and then of course moving to Main Justice, then began to work regularly with partners both in the enforcement and the policy intelligence divisions within FinCEN on cryptocurrency matters. And so when this opportunity came up for them to expand their personnel and expertise, it was an opportunity that I wanted to jump at.
So let me just say that is quite a resume, and in fact, it's quite an awesome resume. And so, on behalf of all of us that organized the event, thank you for your public service. I do want to touch base on the actual title of your role, right? So, Chief Digital Currency Advisor, and it's very intriguing, and at the same time, it's a very loaded title. So, what does this tell us about FinCEN's focus here?
Yes, well, thank you for saying that. I have to tell you, and I think everybody would agree that if you're having fun, it's not really work, right? And the work is fun, even though certainly it touches on some dark stuff, But from FinCEN's perspective, I think that they have always been ahead of the curve when it comes to regulation of value transfer payments, and those entities providing financial services, even in the new technologies such as blockchain or DLT, right? Many people may not recall, but as early as 2011, just a couple of years following the launch of our first decentralized cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, FinCEN had published a regulation broadly defining money transmission. And then shortly thereafter, they had the guidance that came out in 2013 that made it clear that convertible virtual currency, which includes, as you know, the cryptocurrency such as Bitcoin, that it's value that substitutes for currency, and that money transmission in CBC is covered activity under those regulations implementing the BSA. And then more recently in 2019, the agency provided additional clarity on the application of its regulations, implementing these, the BSA to money transmission activities in CBC in particular, and to those developing business models in the space. So I would say that given the astronomical growth of cryptocurrency use in general, right, both within the traditional financial systems and in these newer covered providers, service providers, such as exchanges and kiosks, which are under the regs considered money services businesses, it's no surprise that FinCEN is increasing its resources in this area. So I think the agency and Treasury and the government in general thinks this is particularly important given the global reach and the speed at which blockchain technology products and businesses are morphing and growing. So involving cryptocurrency and the number of covered entities providing these CBC money transmission services, as well as the continuing development of emerging technology in this space. This is, something that FinCEN is focused on, and thus, the growth of my position and lots of other positions within FinCEN that support this subject matter. I did want to make one comment about my title, because some people have asked, well, why are you called Digital Currency Advisor rather than Virtual Currency Advisor, tracking the language? And this is because my portfolio at FinCEN includes central bank digital currencies, as well as convertible virtual currencies. So as our audience is I'm sure very aware, although most CBDCs are designed and released by jurisdictions to run or are expected to run on blockchains, CBDCs aren't virtual currencies. They're a fiat currency that's government backed and issued in digital form. So I will be working on the issues that come up from the perspective of FinCEN's portfolio on CBDCs as well as virtual currency.
So quite a massive portfolio, because it seems to be that there's a report that comes out every 3 seconds of the day on CBDC or convertible virtual currencies. So a lot to do there. Real quick, can you describe your relationship with Acting Director Michael Mosier? It sounded from the press release that he was ecstatic to have you come on board. So just wanted to kind of understand a little bit about the relationship between you two.
Yeah, so as to my relationship with him, this was a no-brainer for me to come and work for him. I've been fortunate to work with Michael in the past in his capacity as FinCEN's Digital Innovation Officer, which included the activity that was occurring in this space um, early on. And then when he was working as the deputy director of the agency under Ken Blanco. In addition, he was one of the primary counterparts, as many people know, to DOJ and lots of federal agencies when he worked for a blockchain analysis company a number of years ago. So serving and advising an executive with such kind of detailed, granular, and extensive technical understanding and knowledge of my subject matter is such a rare opportunity, and I'm really thankful that I have it. In my role, I'm serving as his advisor directly to him and to our deputy director, Anna Lou Terrell. But I will, work both with internal and external partners across all of the divisions of FinCEN on anything that's going to fall in this subject matter.
That's fantastic, and obviously, good luck to you as you move forward and progress in this position. Wanted to focus real quick on you've got, as I said before, such an awesome resume, great past experience. You're on the front lines of various legal battles and enforcement actions. What are some of the long-standing concerns with the cryptocurrency space that really remain a challenge to this day, and that you hope to address as you begin your tenure at FinCEN?
The concern is really with any economic method, product, or service which can be used for money laundering, terrorist financing, any of the illicit finance that would facilitate a full spectrum of activities that are posing risks to public safety, national security, and our financial system in general. And that's whether it's cash, wire transfers, credit and gift cards, payment apps, or cryptocurrency, right? And so as the administrator of the BSA, FinCEN has that responsibility for regulating, enforcing, and making sure that there's compliance with respect to those individuals and entities that are subject to the BSA, including those that are providing financial services involving cryptocurrency and who are serving as financial gatekeepers for these products and activities. I would say that, investigators and regulators, despite these challenges, have really become very adept at conducting investigations involving cryptocurrency, just like they have in any financial activity. Blockchains offer great visibility, at least public blockchains, most of the blockchains, right, that a lot of these cryptocurrencies operate on are provide visibility on quite a bit of valuable data for regulators and investigators. I would say that the ongoing or developing challenges are threefold, in my opinion. So first, uneven and non-existent regulation and supervision of exchanges and similar service providers across jurisdictions. That's the first. Second would be, I think, technology that anonymizes transactions further, such as privacy coins, regardless of the mechanism, whether it's a completely opaque blockchain or a mixing protocol built into the coins themselves. And then those wallets or entities that offer mixing and tubbling services, those are certainly a challenge in our ability to trace transactions and monitor financial activity in cryptocurrency. These are good for privacy, right? And they're an important and underlying purpose and principle that this technology came to be. But unfortunately, these anonymizing features also conceal and obfuscate transaction trails, and therefore can easily, facilitate criminal use such as money laundering and a plethora of underlying illegal activities. So that's certainly a challenge that we're focused on. And then third, as we look forward, and maybe very interesting to this audience, I know that law enforcement and regulators are carefully following the development of DeFi platforms and the products and the risk that they will pose. And I think that the use of regulations and authorities within the U.S., coupled with International engagement and encouragement of other jurisdictions to adopt similar and consistent oversight mechanisms in the industry will over time solve most of the first challenge that I mentioned. That's the hope, right? The second and third challenges are going to be more difficult, and possible solutions will definitely be a work in progress.
That's great, and thank you for that list. And I think I want to shift some of our conversation here to focus on kind of near term and future priorities, and as it relates to FinCEN, right? So as you're well aware, the Treasury, among other agencies, recently published their spring 2021 regulatory agendas. FinCEN included a final rule stage for proposed requirements related to convertible virtual currencies and digital assets. We've obviously heard from Acting Director Mosier in late May that these rules are still pending. So I'd be interested to hear of your views on what FinCEN has published so far in relation to these proposals. Are you paying particular attention to these proposals? With the understanding that you've only been in this position for about 3 or 4 days now. So, but is there anything you could tell us about these proposals, and do you anticipate final rules by the end of this year?
So as much as I know your listeners would love to hear more information about this, what I can say is that FinCEN obviously issued the NPRM to solicit comments on the potential regulation, including the possible effects, and that given that the rule is still pending, I can't comment further, including regarding the timeline. Of course, this is in my portfolio to pay attention to, and I am paying attention to it. And all of government that is affected by the BSA and financial regulation has been, focused and paying attention to this for some time. And I was looking at this as well when I was at DOJ, but unfortunately I can't provide any information to update because it's still pending.
So I tried, Michelle. I really, I really tried, okay. But no, I appreciate that answer, and we look forward to comments from you and the acting director as we move forward on these proposals. Let's touch base on the Financial Action Task Force. They, as you're well aware, they recently held their plenary meeting in late June, in which the multilateral organization announced that it will finalize FATF's revised guidance on virtual assets and VASP I believe it was in October or November of this year, and particularly as it relates to travel rule requirements. So, looking back on your, again, awesome resume, you served on the U.S. delegation to FATF. So to what extent have you been involved in the discussions related to the FATF proposed guidance, and what do you make of the decision to postpone the decision until to finalize these proposals until October or November of this year?
Sure. So my role while at the DOJ with respect to the FATF work on virtual assets was to serve as an advisor and subject matter expert to the Treasury-led U.S. delegation. So appropriately, the relevant amendments to the recommendations, additions of the definitions for virtual assets and virtual asset service providers that came earlier, and then the guidance, both the previously issued guidance and the pending guidance that you mentioned, were informed by activities occurring in the financial system. And so DOJ is in the unique position to advise on trends and typologies around the illicit use of cryptocurrencies from their criminal investigations and prosecutions. Given the AML, CFT, and now the counter-proliferation focus of the FATF, the U.S. delegation relied upon DOJ attorneys from the money laundering and asset recovery section of the criminal division where I worked, attorneys in the National Security Division, and investigators from a wide variety of federal law enforcement agencies to inform those positions. So I shared these advisory responsibilities with virtual asset and blockchain subject matter experts from FinCEN and from the SEC, who also actively participated in informing the discussions related to the virtual asset guidance. I'm going to continue that role now with FinCEN, along with my new but very familiar colleagues in the enforcement and Compliance Policy and Intelligence Division. That said, DOJ, FinCEN, and SEC don't speak for the U.S. delegation or exercise decision-making authority during FATF meetings and plenaries. The U.S. delegation positions are decided and communicated by the Department of the Treasury's Office of Terrorist Financing and Financial Crime. So, we were subject matters and experts and advisors to help them, make decisions as in their role as the leaders of the delegation. To answer your question about the decision to postpone the issuance of the new guidance, while certainly I do not speak for the U.S. delegation or for the FATF, as many of you know, the Policy Development Group, the PDG, through its Virtual Asset Consultative Group, which is the smaller working group within the PDG, held a private sector consultative forum in the spring, which included soliciting comments from affected private industry. And they also tasked a number of blockchain analysis companies with some specific data research and reporting for the FATF. This was all covered in FATF's recently released second 12-month report. For your listeners who haven't seen that, that's available on FATF's website. It has a lot of information. The additional time, I think, will provide an opportunity for the review and consideration of the voluminous industry comments that came in, and the findings of the tool companies before they finalize the guidance. And I think that's really all that's about.
Right, and thank you for that. Let me switch gears. We got about 5-10 minutes left. I wanted to kind of focus on the privacy, transparency, and really the role of technology in this space, and in particular, focusing on the role of technology and really the focus and not focus, but the dilemma that regulators and policymakers face, where on the one hand, emerging technologies can help enable illicit financing, obfuscation of financial transactions, but on the other hand, this same technology can also mitigate these concerns. So, what are your views on what appears to be a constant tug of war between the need for greater transparency and oversight in this space on the one hand, but then the need to protect personal and financial information and encourage innovation on the other hand? Is there a right balance here, and if so, what is it?
The easy answer is, yes, there's absolutely a tug of war, and I think we all probably know that neither side's equities are going to disappear. But in determining what the right balance is, I think my director, Mike Mosier, explained it very well in his recent talk at Consensus. The idea that privacy is an important part of self-determination, right? And that self-determination and opportunity are foundational to our country's establishment. And obviously, I know we may have an international audience, but I think that would be true for many countries, particularly democratic countries. However, personal sovereignty isn't about anonymity to do any and all types of harm, fraud, theft, exploitation, and violence to others that limits their sovereignty without accountability. And so with that, I think I embrace my director's previously stated goal that FinCEN's going to proactively engage in policy and technical discussions with industry and privacy advocates to make sure that we're all working towards a mutual appreciation of the risks on both sides of the related issues, and trying to look towards how we can develop practical and appropriate solutions. Hopefully that will result in the important preservation of that privacy and personal sovereignty that also kind of goes into cybersecurity as well. And that this includes both privacy, but also freedom of those people who are using and operating on financial, in the financial ecosystems and on those networks from violence and exploitation.
Let's talk about the role of technology here and how it can be brought to really develop an appropriate balance between the two. And I think we've got a panel right after this that has some fantastic people developing some really interesting stuff. And as we previously heard, the acting director, his call out to industry being, send us your engineers and not your lawyers. And, no offense to any of you that are lawyers, but I thought that was very interesting and really to engage with FinCEN to showcase or come up with some technical solutions to policy problems. And, FATF recently published, a report covering the opportunities and challenges of using emerging technologies to support AML, CFT compliance. Where do you see technology playing a fundamental role here? And really, are there ways of using technology to move away from a system based entirely on identity, such as market surveillance and AI/ML, to address, the various concerns and issues in this space?
This is a great question. Technology absolutely can play a huge role in supporting AML and CFT compliance. And that's what's so exciting, I think, about working in this space. We've seen this with the development of blockchain analysis tools in a very short span of time. These companies that are developing software and algorithms that enable law enforcement and regulators to, efficiently investigate and monitor transactional activity. And these same tools used by industry, both traditional financial institutions, the money transmitters, and the like, to meet their obligations under the BSA, and to ensure that their platforms are not being used for illicit purposes. When I first began as a prosecutor working on these cases involving cryptocurrency, the investigators were tracing transactions on the blockchain by hand, if you will. They didn't have great tracing and analysis software that exists now. So we're also seeing technology developed as we speak to devise these solutions to the travel rule compliance for blockchain-based transactions, including incorporating exactly what you mentioned, market surveillance and AI tech to complement existing compliance and illicit finance detection methods. I understand that there is a ton of activity relating to digital identity, and some of it is blockchain-based. That is not my area of expertise, but you should invite FinCEN's newly hired expert on digital identity. Her name is Kay Turner, for a chat on this topic. Kay is FinCEN's senior counselor to the director on digital identity, inclusion, and digital payments infrastructure. And I think she's yet another example of FinCEN's expansion of personnel and expertise in the fintech and innovation space. And the commitment to actually look at what technology can, improve the goals that we have. I think, kind of as a final note, across government, regular engagement with industry, developing these technologies is an important part of our jobs. It's a crucial part of our jobs. The frequent comment or misperception that regulators just don't understand the technology, I think is simply false. There are talented and experienced subject matter experts working across all of these agencies' relevant functions, and that's especially true at FinCEN. In fact, I'm very excited about participating in FinCEN's already established innovation hours, those bring your engineers hours that Mike talked about, in order to learn and expand my expertise. And these developers and engineers are building fascinating new products, and I'm personally excited to see what the opportunities are going forward. And I know FinCEN will continue to pay close attention to the new technology and how that can meet the goals that we have as an agency.
Fantastic, Michele. Way to go! That was a great 30 minutes. We covered obviously a lot of ground. Thank you so much for agreeing to participate. And please give my thanks to Sherry James. I know she's listening in on this, so she works very closely with you at FinCEN. So for all the help that she has done on the back end, and really good luck to you on your new role and going forward.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking with you, Jackson.